and then I'll call on you so you can speak, so you can have the table. Right now, if Mr. Cooner could call the roll.
Okay. Marianne Abadi. Marianne, you present?
I'm present. Thank you.
Okay. Danielle Angelari is not here. Neither is Linda. Tim Neighbors, present. Dr. Bill Gorski, I think I saw him.
Here.
Okay. Julie Morris is here. Right, Julie?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. And then how about Reverend Copeland?
Here.
Here. Oh, okay. All right. So that's what we have, Tim.
All right. I don't know if we had anybody for a public comment. Gus, was there anybody that signed up for a public comment?
No, there was not.
Okay, thanks a lot. The action, I don't know if y'all have your agendas available, but we have a couple action items on the agenda. We're gonna switch some things around. That way you could get in a more organized order than what I have listed. Paul, were you able to just give us a little, we're gonna do the FOIA overview first, then we're gonna do the election of officers next, then we're gonna do the committees next after that. And then we could do the scanner service and bylaws last. That sound okay?
And Tim, I wonder if you could acknowledge that Jay and I, Wendy Larson Bennett, are non-voting board members, and we are both present.
Okay.
Got it. I have that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, we can, I can give you an overview on that if you want now.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I just emailed out 2 documents and a link regarding FOIA and also regarding the Open Meetings Act. And the Open Meetings Act is probably what you're going to be more concerned about than FOIA, generally speaking. So the both statutes, laws deal with public bodies, which the Community Mental Health Board is a public body under the law. So the board has to follow those laws. For the Open Meetings Act, the main, there's a couple main points that we need to follow on that. So anytime that there's a majority of a quorum meeting to discuss public business, that has to be announced and notice given, because that constitutes a meeting under the Open Meetings Act. So a majority of a quorum or a 9-member board, quorum would be 5, the majority would be 3. So anytime that 3 or more board members are meeting to discuss public business, that constitutes a public meeting and notice has to be given for that. And that meeting doesn't have to be in person. It can be by email, or it can be like this. Anytime that you're discussing public business with 3 or more people, that's considered an open meeting, or that's a meeting that needs to be open. A couple of things that the Open Meetings Act requires. One is there has to be at some point a schedule of regular meetings posted. So at some point you'll decide when you're going to have your regular meetings. I know you're just starting out, you don't, there's not a set time and date, but each year at the beginning of the year, there has to be a schedule of regular meetings posted, either probably at the county administration building, or if there's a website, on the website. The agendas for those meetings have to be posted 48 hours before the meeting, and only things that are on the agenda can be voted on or taken final action on. So if the agenda has, and so what I would recommend doing is making sure that the items that are on the agenda are open enough that you can alter them if you end up changing your mind about voting on something. So if you said you were going to vote on recommending a grant to Rosecrans, for instance, on the agenda, you might want to put recommending grants, voting on recommending grants, so that if you want to add a different entity or change entities that you're recommending, that you're not tied down to whatever's on the agenda. The Open Meetings Act also requires the opportunity for public comment, but the public comment is open for anybody in the community to come in and say what they want to say about the issues or about anything, really. Rules can be set for that. The board can set their rules for how that works. For the county board, I think the rule is 3 minutes. They have to sign up by 4 o'clock the day of the meeting, and they can only do it 3 times a year on the same subject, I think. So whatever it is, it doesn't matter, but it's got to be, there has to be an opportunity for public comment, and there at some point you have to have rules for that. Another requirement under the Open Meetings Act is that minutes have to be taken. On the document I mailed out, it had a list of what the minutes have to what is required in the minutes. It has to say where the meeting was held, when, who was present, what the votes were on anything, of course. And then once the public body approves those minutes, which is usually at the next meeting, those minutes have to be made public within 10 days. As far going back to the agenda for a minute, you can discuss anything you want at a regularly scheduled meeting, whether or not it's on the agenda, but you can't take any final action on something that's not on the agenda. The Open Meetings Act allows for closed session for a few, or for some specific discussions, but I don't think you're going to have too many of those. Mostly it's personnel, litigation, negotiations for various purchases or business transactions, essentially. So those are the main points. Oh, and the Open Meetings Act, the other thing is that the board members have to get certified under the Open Meetings Act. And in the email I sent, there's a link to the Attorney General's website where you go on there, you get certified, you register as a public board member, and there's a training, and then you go through that and you have to get certified for that within 90 days of becoming a member of the board. So
I think we already did that.
did you already do that? Who did that?
I thought we already did. I thought I was muted. Sorry about that. But yeah, I thought we already went through that process, didn't we?
It's like a training.
Right.
Yes, I remember doing that.
I took it. Now I have my my certificate from the training. Is that something that has to be sent somewhere, or is it just you have to?
Oh, sorry. I think you have to, I think the board has to keep track of those, or has to keep those on a file.
I think I dropped mine off at the mayor's office. That was the instructions that I got from somebody. I could look it up.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Early on, when Tim sent that link, I clicked on it and it said there's a need for a username and password, and unless I missed it somewhere, I don't know what the username and password is. So I probably missed it, but how do I access that?
I think you have to, well, I didn't do it, but I think maybe somebody else did it that can answer that, but I think there's a way to do that.
I just clicked on it, Bill, and then it gives you 3 categories, and you're a public body member or public board member, and that's what I chose. And then you just have to fill out your own information, and then they lead you into the portal to take the actual training. So I just clicked on the link that Tim sent us, and I was able to complete the training that way.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
sure.
I have one other question, if I could, about the agendas. So again, I probably missed this as well, but I didn't see the agenda for today until last evening. And I wondered, does it go out? How far ahead does it go out? How do we as board members see the agenda, in a timely fashion? And then to Paul's point, if there's things on it, I mean, can we talk about the agenda back and forth before the agenda is made public? in order to determine what's appropriate for the agenda, or even doing that? Is that part of a public process?
So you could request items to be put on the agenda. If there's something on the agenda that you have concerns about, I mean, that's, I think you can talk to the chairman or of the committee to discuss that.
So who's responsible for doing the agenda, for generating it?
Usually it would come from the chairman or the president of the board.
Okay.
The president usually works with, oh, go ahead, Tim. You're muted. Tim, you're muted.
Remember, at the last meeting, these are the topics that we listed at the last meeting that we wanted to speak on for this meeting. So that's what I had given to the agenda, speak on for the agenda for this meeting. And I don't know if anybody took notes from the last meeting, but I did get the this agenda out a little late to the board, but it's supposed to be posted to the public within 40 days. I mean, 48 hours of the meeting. So the public will have when, where, and the agenda. And I had given it to, it was posted on Tuesday.
And it's currently being posted on the Winnebago County Board website, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, all the meetings are listed and then you can get the agenda for each meeting. It's not real user friendly, but it can be done. But
And
it would be very nice to get a copy of it though. And we'll talk about it at the end, you know, before this meeting ends, I'm assuming, for our next meeting. So we're all in agreement that, you know, we're listing the most important things.
does that
All
answer
right.
your questions, Dr. Gorski?
Yes, Paul, thank you.
Okay, good, thanks. I think those were the main points on the Open Meetings Act, just to make sure that, well, in everything I said, it'll probably be in that training, I suppose. If you already took it, maybe you already know everything. So on FOIA, there has to be, the only thing, so FOIA is Freedom of Information Act. As a public body, this board has to comply with FOIA. The main thing is that there has to be a FOIA officer. The board has to have somebody who's a FOIA officer. And there's a training on the Attorney General's website for that also. And I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of FOIA issues with this board, for at least currently. But you know, the FOIA is designed so that members of the public can get whatever records that a public body has that are public records by requesting it, and then the body has 5 days to respond to that. And as long as, like I said, the only thing that we have to worry about right now is having somebody appointed to be a FOIA officer for the board and taking that training. And whenever there's questions that come up, you know, we'd be happy to help answer those. So I think those are the main points I had on FOIA and on Open Meetings Act.
Thank you, Paul. Next we'll have an election of officers.
I had a quick question, I'm sorry. As it relates to both FOIA and the Open Meetings Act, given the fact that electronic communication is going to be even more important than it's been in the past, and I'm thinking specifically about emails, what's best practice as it relates to a board like this? Should we have an email account that's designated just for our board interaction as opposed to our personal email, our regular email address?
That probably would be easiest for you, I suspect. You know, for a FOIA, what a request might come back, or a board might get a request saying we want all communications between board member X and the president, for instance. You know, if it's either way, it's gonna, I should say, I'll go back. Finding the emails, if they're in a separate email account, is a lot easier than finding the emails if it's in your general email account. So if you can do that, that's probably not a bad idea.
We might want to bring Gus back into this. I know like county board members have specific email addresses. I wonder if, hi Gus. I'm
Hello.
wondering if it would be possible to set up email accounts for each board member so that it was, you know, like, you know, W Bennett at wincomhb.us or something, so that if there's a need for retrieving emails, that's where we're communicating.
Great, this is Gus, great idea. wcmhb.us or .org.
Right.
Have your separate domain. I can host the email service for you in Winnebago County. We would want to bill you for it at some point. Then your email is archived and it's searchable at one location. That is a preferred, what was being described, as opposed to using your personal email accounts, using your own domain. And that makes life easier for you. And in a FOIA circumstance, which I deal with all the time, searching from one repository is easier,
So,
such as a domain.
so you could set that up.
Sure. And then
If you need more work.
figure I'll bill you at some point when you're up on your feet and got revenue. From Winnebago County will bill you.
Right, right.
So, Tim, whoever's I don't know who the chair is.
Yes, I am.
Tim, I just need an instruction from you to set up a domain and email, and then email addresses and things like that. So whatever domain you guys want to decide on. Okay, like WC, MH, mental health, MHB.org, we can do that.
And I figured we'd go through all that pretty soon after we get established. I was just trying to get everything established first so we could get the permanent chair going and everything. I knew we still had to do that. I knew we were going to get have to go through billing and all that, but I was just trying to get the board established first before we get to that part.
And then if I may, Paul was referencing minutes and et cetera. This meeting is being recorded and streamed to our YouTube channel. So once you decide who's secretary, they can play back the YouTube channel stream and go ahead and create appropriate minutes. Okay?
Oh, that's fancy.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, I'll go away again.
Yeah, pardon me. I'm trying to keep up with you with the minutes, okay? And I did submit a set of minutes for that first meeting that we had. Tim, I don't know when you want to, or if you want to run by people today.
Okay, I thought I sent that email out to everybody, the minutes from the last meeting. But the other thing I wanted to talk about with the Open Meetings Act, when I send out an email, we can't respond to each in a group. We have to respond back individually, because when everybody responds in a group, that counts as an open meeting. I mean, that counts as a meeting. So when you get an email back, just don't respond or call that person that sent the email individually, because when, just like some of the emails that we had already listed, everybody kept responding up under the same conversation. That's considered a meeting and a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Am I right, Paul?
You're right.
Yes.
We talk about that a lot with my board in my district. So it's important that when, just as you said, when somebody responds to an email, it goes just to the person, because anybody up more than 3 people, you said, would be considered a meeting and a violation.
All right, so how do we want to dispose of the elections for officers?
Honestly, I don't know how we do that without having some time to have people share more about themselves than what we've been able to do. And that's one of the things, obviously, that working together over this sort of medium makes it difficult. But I have a suggestion that we have a time right at the beginning of this to talk about, to poll each person who's here and let people give a brief kind of presentation of why they're here. And so to help us with understanding, you know, where people are and what their skill sets are and their desires, you know, to serve as an officer of the board.
And Tim, at this point, has the county board even accepted the action or the election results yet? Have you had a meeting since the election was certified?
What do you mean by the election results?
Well, the clerk, the county clerk just certified the election earlier this week. And there has to be an adoption by the county board of the election results. And in talking to Frank Haney, my understanding is the county board is going to have to pass an ordinance. And I think it's
That has
before-
nothing to do with the 708 board that we're establishing right now. That's just for the mental health tax that you're talking about. So right now we're establishing, we already have the board, we're just establishing the offices of the board.
okay.
So that's a
Well-
separate thing than what we're talking about right now.
Right. But I sort of agree with Dick that at this point, it seems kind of fast to actually
Okay.
elect officers. Especially we're missing 2 people.
We want to take time to have people talk, or
Go ahead.
what does everybody think?
Maybe, I forgot who it was. I guess it was Linda who sent a little blurb about who she is and why
Right.
she's on the board. Maybe if we could all, just for the sake of time, if we could all either send something similar or our resumes or something, just so we'd at least have a general knowledge of each other's background. I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
I don't mind talking, but I think that right now, I think it would be more efficient if we at least had either a resume or a self-description before we even talked.
Okay, so I think I have a list of everyone's resume that was given when you all were appointed. So I'll gather the list of everybody's resume and send it out to everybody.
Dick's question though originally was why we're here, which whatever little blurb of mine I think I remember the chairman got would have nothing related to that. So the specifics of what led the chairman to say, ask me, would not be contained in that resume.
Okay,
And I just have to say, I agree with delaying this until everyone potentially is here. I know that that may be difficult and there may be meetings as we go along where 1 or 2 people won't be here, but if it's at all possible to have our 2 missing members here and not only have a chance to have reviewed something in writing, as Pastor Copeland said, but then have us speak to what drew us to say yes to this, to me, that would seem to be the fairest way to select somebody to lead the group.
I agree with that.
I agree. I think it would be good. would we then send that blurb to you, Tim, individually, and then you would include it with our resume? Or do we just want blurbs and not everybody's full resume? Or what are we looking for? Because I agree with the blurb part that Dr. Gorski was talking about.
I think the resume can be sent by Tim. That would be a basic kind of framework. But then I think that we should be able to contribute, to one another. I mean, in order to really, it helps to communicate rather than to just write it on a piece of paper, send it in an email or whatever you want to do. But I'd rather communicate, strengths and, what kind of experience that and passion you have for what we're doing and why we are, together on this board. So I'd rather hear it from the person personally.
I'm also curious of who's actually interested in the job.
Well, that's another important factor, right? Yeah.
Right.
So.
All right, so as far as
Tim, we've complicated your life.
Now you
Used to it.
understand that in mental health,
Yeah.
that's everything. Nothing is, everybody's got to feel good about it,
right,
Right.
that's
Right.
fine.
Yeah, that's
So-
what we love to see, that smile. Okay, that's good.
So as far as establishing the bylaws, I know we're not going to get anything established today, but do we still want to establish committees that could work on like some type of outline of the bylaws or a bylaw that we could actually vote on? Because sitting here in the video conference, I can't see just coming up with a bylaw just sitting like that. So how will we dispose of that as well?
I would be happy to work with Paul a little bit. I know Marianne has sent some of the materials from McHenry County to all of us. I
Yeah.
reached out to Stevenson County, and it's kind of funny and sad, but I can't think of the name of the guy who's the chair of the committee. He's brand new. He goes, I've never actually read the bylaws. Wait, they need revision. I'll mail them. I still haven't gotten them. But
Well, Dick had loads from Ogle County and Carroll and
Whiteside.
Whiteside County. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you look at what McHenry has in place, I think everyone should take time to look at that if you're interested in bylaws. And that would be a great template. Of course, it'll be customized for Winnebago County, but
sure.
I do think that that's helpful to, since they are a mental health board and it's a 708 board there, and they've been very successful for years. So
What I'm thinking is maybe Paul and I could do a little video chat, because I ain't coming down to the courthouse. Sorry, Paul. And we could draft something and send that material out to the board to look at. And based on that, we'd at least all have a document in front of us. What do you think, Paul? I'm offering you up.
That sounds good to me. That's fine.
So as we think about this, has anyone considered a mission statement and scan of services? Because, I think the bylaws will, be better drafted if we first have our mission statement.
Well, so yesterday, Dick dropped some materials off to me about the Mental Health Act and some of the history of some of the other stuff that's gone on in the state. And I immediately realized one of the things we really need to do is maybe plan a bit of a retreat. And I don't know how this is going to happen. It's probably not going to happen till the summer at the earliest, but get someone to facilitate for us sort of a mission and vision process. And I have 4 names already. One of them, David Sidney from Transform Rockford, Jennifer Smith from the Community Foundation, Pam Clark Reidenbach from NICNY, who worked on the actual referendum committee, and Matthew Johnson, who's my minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church, who does this kind of facilitation all the time. But in preparation for that, one of the things that Frank and I talked about the other day was perhaps recruiting an organization like the College of Medicine, maybe, or he mentioned the Region 1 Planning Council, which I'm not sure about, to help us synthesize the mental health research and needs assessments that we already have out there, so that we have some idea of, there's a big ocean out there. Is there an island we want to float towards? You know, so that when we're developing a mission, we have some ideas about what are we trying, you know, what's the need that we're trying to fulfill. Does that make any sense?
I think it makes sense, but I think we have to be careful about how fast we move on something like that. I mean, we have all sorts of data that
Right.
is available, right? But, you know, one thing is the strategic plan. That does not come cheap for a facilitator. I have another name to add to that.
Okay.
You know, and we should all, you know, get bids from, you know, and kind of just, you know, I've been through so many strategic plans. As I'm looking at Dr. Gorski, I can only imagine how many he's been through and updates and and Dr. Morris and everyone in this particular board. I mean, that's just something that, you know, we've done in the past routinely. So what I don't, you know, I hesitate right now to, I know Frank Haney called me and talked about the RMAP and all of that. And I think really and truly, we should think about what we need, but, you know, not and consider everything. And strategic planning, I think, is the first phase of this. But before we start hiring people and spending money, that's my fear, that these dollars need to be concentrated on and we're going to have fewer dollars than we ever anticipated because of the economies being
Right.
locked down. People aren't
Right.
buying or going places. So
Right.
I don't know. That's my opinion. I'm not opposed, but I just don't want to get ahead of ourselves on this whole.
Well, I guess my only reason for bringing that up was because Frank called, but I do think that sort of a visioning process in some ways
Oh, I
has
agree.
to do with, in a lot of ways, why we are interested in this board to begin with, why we think it's an important thing for our community and why we've all agreed to participate. You know,
Well,
so
what-
maybe mission and vision does come
So-
first.
Well,
One of
wait
the
a minute.
things I want
We're
everybody-
not totally bereft of something, okay? I mean, that was one of the reasons that I shared the community support
Right,
system
right.
paper with you, because in a way, that does speak to mission and vision.
It
okay?
does directly. Yeah,
Because we through this whole campaign have talked about, you know, providing services for serious mentally ill people and those who are addicted, and we spoke the fact that our priority was going to be helping people who could not socially function because of either their illness or addiction. So I'm not, you know, I mean, I honestly feel that given a little bit of time and having some discussion, we're perfectly capable within this group, and at least in my view, of managing a legitimate mission statement and vision for what it is that we want to do. And so, and what I would not want to hear, and that is to have some other organization or group come in with their own agenda and try to sell that to us, because, you know, I guess I'm speaking from my own perspective of saying that's not why I worked
right.
to get this tax, you know, so and what I worked to get this tax for was exactly what's in that CSS, you know, because that's where I think we can head off people to the jail or to emergency rooms, that we can help kids, etc. Okay, so yeah, I'm with Marianne. I don't see bringing in outsiders yet. I mean, I think
Okay.
we
All right.
we have plenty of good people here.
Well, so
think
how
starting
do
with-
we get going? Huh?
I think that starting with what is our charge? Why was this board formed to begin with?
Right.
And then what is our reason for being on this board? It kind of goes back to, I think we all need to put something down as to what is our reason for being on this board? Why is it important? And that can lead to then our ideas of what is a vision or a mission. And then I would suggest we get all that to Tim, and then we bring it together as a group on our next meeting and really take a look at, okay, so are we all on a similar page? We all come from different areas. So I think getting everybody's perspective about why am I on the board, and what is it that I see as a mission or a vision, and then you get those ideas together, and then you start to, wordsmith it, do those types of things, so that then we have a couple people work on, here's the vision, here's the mission, based on our number one, our charge, why was the board formed? Number two, what we see as how that's going to play out, based on all the people in this room.
And Julie, if I could, I agree with that. And I think one other key element, it came up at our first meeting, which I know you and Pastor Copeland weren't at, but Dick brought it up, and he might have even unknown caller. He might have even said something that tweaked my thinking about it in an email, but the current environmental assessment of what is there.
Yeah.
And of all of you here, I'm not here because I have the mental or behavioral health background that many of you do who are here. That's not my reason, which I can get into with a blurb. But I think it would be good to have a foundational assessment of what services are there, particularly linking that with the vision. So if we know what the vision is, and Dick already just threw out something as perhaps an early vision of who would be the priority to address, what vulnerable population would be, in a cascade fashion, would be the first population you would want to address, that may become part of what a vision is like. And then to me, the next step is, well, what's there now?
Right.
And what are the gaps in what's there now? To me, that's a sequence of how, as Marianne referred to strategic planning earlier, I mean, that's typically what you would do, is you'd have an environmental assessment. Okay, what's out there? And what's out there that relates to why we exist, and what's missing and what's out there related to why we exist.
Right.
And then you begin to develop your action steps in that. So I would love that, because I'm not as familiar as many of you are here with the details of what's there and what might be missing.
Right.
I'm thinking Linda Sandquist through the United Way may have that information at her fingertips.
Well, one of the things, again, what Bill, back to, you're right, of what I mentioned in the email, this in the CSS, which still represents best practice in mental health. Yes, there's the list of services that represent what are needed in order to have an array of services for a comprehensive system within a community. And so you're right. I mean, I have in the past used that to map the community, to find out, for example, crisis services, just as an example of like who is doing what are crisis services like presently, or the whole thing of who's doing case management, for example, with another one of, with again, serious mentally ill people and or seriously addicted people, or in another one would be, which I know is another need, and that is how many psychiatrists do we have currently are prescribing, are able to, help people stabilize on their medication within our community. So, yeah, I mean, we could, I mean, again, I believe we have a tool that can be used to address that we can, without, I mean, without a huge amount of work, we could, you know, by sending out some questionnaires to people in different agencies and places, we can fairly quickly get an assessment of like what we have or don't.
Well, I think you really want to take a look at the recent survey done by the Children's Planning Group that's been going on for a whole year. I mean, they did an extensive survey for children's services, the gaps in services in Winnebago County and actually the region. And they came up with some very striking findings. And
Who did that?
it
was
was
that?
in Northern Illinois. They did all of the surveying for us. And I think that we could use that just is kind of hot off the press information in regards to the gaps in mental health services for kids. And then also, I'm sure Dr. Morris is very familiar with the Erickson Institute, and they just released all of their findings in terms of even developmental delays for kids. And I'm not talking about developmental disability. I'm talking about children in the school system that aren't at age level and able to perform in the classroom socially for various reasons, poverty and whatever. That study is online. There's
I've got it too.
Yeah. And one other thing I just want to add here, I agree with Dr. Gorski. You know, it's really important that we start at that point. But we also have to remember being, you know, on the committee in this campaign, we made promises to the voters. We didn't promise them what the board would do, but what we did is gave them that framework that we were pushing forward from the committee, because everyone wanted to know where the dollars were going to be spent. And the community support model was something that was very reassuring to the public, because services were wrapped around the client, the person that needed the service. And this can fit children as well as adults. So I think that Dick's model that he sent to all of us is such an excellent framework, plus it's evidence-based. So yeah, I think it's helpful.
That's what, I guess, Marianne, to your point, I guess that's what I want to know. What is our expectation? What is our charge? Why was this board formed? What is, you know, I know it's tied to the referendum that was out there, but what is it? And
well, really, the main emphasis is access to service, immediate access to mental health and addiction services at the time the person needs it, not when it's convenient or when, you know, the waiting list is down.
So setting up crisis teams.
Exactly. I mean, it's a huge, huge need for people to have access to mental health care and addiction care.
is there something written down? Is it written somewhere?
Well, you know, I mean, even if it would be helpful, what the voters learned about the thought process, we have a PowerPoint that includes, you know, the CSS model, and that's kind of a framework we could use, you know, to even, you know, so that this board knows what the community, you know, was instructed with.
I'd like to see that, Marianne. I've not seen that. I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that speaks to Bill's point that we, and my point, that we need to know first, why are we here? And if there's a PowerPoint or a document or something, we need to start with that before we can even decide what mission is. I don't know the details of that. I talked to Frank. I'm very passionate about this topic, but I need to know what is our charge.
That makes a lot of sense. Wendy, you have the PowerPoint, right?
I'm wondering if I still have it. I may have dumped it.
Well, you know what, Gary Jenke at Rockford Regional Health Council certainly has.
Oh, Gary has it. You know,
Yeah.
how about I'll reach out to Gary,
Yes,
get him to email it to everybody.
that would be most helpful.
Mary Ann, I was just going to mention the Rockford Regional Health Council, and I'm several years behind on that, of course, but you know, we all know the Community Health Needs Assessment, which is part of the health system's 3-year obligation through the Affordable Care Act. I mean, every year I was involved with the Rockford Health Council, basically behavioral and mental health services turned out to be the #1 gap and priority in the community. And is there a treasure trove of information and data there? That is
Absolutely, there is. That's another, I mean, actually, that's almost 2 decades of that.
Yes,
study.
right. Right.
Mhm. So, and now this year, they're collaborating with the Winnebago County Health Department and putting out the Rockford Regional Health Council. So I think, you know, they're
Yeah.
doing it currently, so we'll be able
I think
to
so.
access that too.
That goes back to the that goes back to the 90s, though, you know,
Right.
you know, it was always in the top, you know, 2 or 3. Okay.
Yes,
Right
yes,
behind
always.
right behind safety. Okay.
That's right, Dick. That's right.
Yeah.
So if we're that would be the document, or that would be some data that we would want to take a look at as we're along with what the charge was for this group. And then we might then want to start with a vision or a mission. And then from there, we have to gather all of the what's out there, what are our gaps, what are redundancies, and then how do we develop a plan from there, back to Bill's
Yeah.
point earlier.
And Julie, I think another helpful resource would be the handbook that Dick distributed yesterday, because really it's the background materials for local mental health authorities in Illinois and their vision and mission. I think that's informative. I mean, it doesn't have to be ours by any stretch, but certainly I think it's very, that manual is well put together and informative, so.
Julie, I'm sorry for its format, okay? I had asked that everybody is in the chairman's office and also in the health department are obviously totally fixed on the virus. So I had hoped that they would copy the manual as I gave it to them. But what I got was the copy of the content. So
Okay.
it's kind of like you didn't get the dividers, or you didn't get, you know, the separations, which I know can be done, but it'll take you a little time to do that. I'm sorry.
I'm really impressed with the staple, though.
I'll have to come by, Dick, and pick it up.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's the truth. In one place, you could have nailed it. But can we go back to Wendy's point? Wouldn't it be helpful if she and Paul, you know, would begin to share with us some bylaws that they're extrapolating from McHenry County, and then at the same time, you know, we'll make a list of Bill for this mapping of the clinical services, draw that out a little bit, so that you see what that might look like.
Mhm.
Agreed.
That would be, I'm sorry.
Just so you know, I'll sit down with Paul in the next week or so and get that accomplished and get copies out to you guys. I also sent you our fact sheet from the political campaign that includes the RAP mental health services that Dick is so very passionate about. So you have some idea, and I'll excavate and find the PowerPoint as well.
Did you just send that to us, or would have I?
Just in the last 30 seconds.
She just did. Yep, she just did. Thank you, Wendy.
Sure.
Yeah, this is good.
And it's sort of it's in 2 pages what the PowerPoint is in about 30. So.
Great.
That's great.
Yeah, this is all great stuff for us to prepare for.
And Mary Ann and Dick, I left you out.
Yeah, okay, we got it, Wendy.
And did we also decide that we would get to Tim a blurb about ourselves and why we're here?
Yeah,
I think that would be good. I also think it would be interesting, rather than a resume, to just tell each other what we think we bring to the board, what our strengths are,
mhm.
you know, so that if someone is good with computers and can do
Ooh.
Zoom, we need to know that.
That's why I was late getting to the meeting. For me, technology peaked with frozen pizza.
We're all gonna emerge from this virus either dead or computer savvy.
Yeah, prefer computer savvy.
Yeah,
Yes.
we heard that.
Hey, I learned to Facebook or FaceTime. That's what it's called, FaceTime.
Yeah,
Very exciting.
So we'll get that to Tim, and then we can, to Mary Ann's point earlier, we can talk about it at our next meeting as well. Just so we can kind of introduce ourselves and know a little bit more before our next meeting. I think that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yep.
Now this
I-
blurb, oh, I'm sorry.
Go
This-
ahead.
This blurb that we're sending, we can do that and say just send to all.
Right.
That doesn't have to be an individual email or anything.
That would have to go to Tim, otherwise we'd be violating open meetings act.
No, you could send the email yourself to everybody. It's just the response is the key. Just everybody don't respond to the same conversation. Anybody can send an email. It's just everybody doesn't need to respond and have a conversation.
Okay,
Mm,
I didn't know that.
I still might just send it to you, Tim.
Yeah,
Okay.
That Erickson Institute material, I have copies. Would it be useful to get copies, just hard copies made, and ask the chairman's office to disseminate those? I mean, it's really fascinating stuff about our neighborhoods and the same thing, Mary Ann, if you have access to that child information,
Mhm.
I think the more information we can share so that we're on the same
Sure.
knowledge page.
I can send that. Actually, I have an executive summary of that survey.
Okay.
That people, the community wanted to know the gaps in children's mental health. So I was able to get the researcher to just do an executive summary. So it's a page and a half. And
Well,
it
that
really,
should be electronic, isn't it? Is
Yeah.
that electronic?
yeah, I can send it electronically. Mhm.
And
Well, that,
how about yours, Wendy? Is yours
Um,
electronic, or do you want to give us a hard copy? That's what I heard.
let me look at it. I mean, what I have is, I don't know, 50 or 75 pages. Some other volunteer stuff I'm doing that I'm just starting to dip a toe in, but they initiated us by doing like a big presentation of with all the overlays of, you know, where the single parents are, where the violence is, where the college degrees are, those kinds of pieces of information and how it interacts with kids' welfare and well-being.
I would much rather have that electronically than.
Okay,
big-
all right, let me see what I can do.
You know, you may go onto their website and be able to download that, Wendy, if you want to do that.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'll
I
check it
know
out.
that they
Oh.
have the maps up, you know, showing the neighborhoods, and it is fascinating because 2 streets over from one of the worst, you know, kind of what should I say? They're children that were underperforming on one street or in one neighborhood. The difference between just 2 streets was incredible in how another group of kids were performing at the same grade level. So they were able to, because for 2 years, they tested every 5-year-old going into District 205. So for kindergarten, so that, you know, they had some excellent data to work with. And
So Wendy, if you contact either David Sidney at Transform Rockford or Anisha Grimmett at Alignment Rockford, I'm sure
See, I'm working on alignment stuff, so.
I'm sure they'll be able to pull it up and
They both have it. Yep.
get it out to us.
Okay, maybe I'll just send you the email link. What do you think? Okay, I'll do that. Okay.
So we all got what we need to do in between now and next meeting. Do we have, what are our goals for the next meeting?
Well, I think Paul and I are going to generate some kind of document over the next couple of weeks. Definitely will be a work in progress, but for us to then discuss possible bylaws. How's that?
Mhm.
When, do we already have the next meeting scheduled? Or is it
No.
Not yet.
Okay,
So we're doing the bylaws, we're doing the, we're getting information from all these different sources to review before then.
Yes,
That would be good.
We're sending our blurb.
that's what I have. Yeah, okay, so for election of officers responding to, I have two things that we had talked about. One, resumes are going to be shared, but the second piece that people are asking for are for each of the board, each members to generate a personal comment about their ideas for their appointment and presence on the board. Under the scan for service, we have a commitment to look at the CSS in regard to how that might be used to get data. And also, we're going to make a list of other data reports or other reports of that are present in the community that we might use in order to get an overview of what exists and what's working. Then we get to bylaws, and Wendy and Paul are going to draft some information related to bylaws and taken from the McHenry County report. That's what I have for work between now and then. Can we, like on the first one, Tim, you're taking care of pretty much the information related to election of officers. The SCAM service, certainly I'm for one, I'm willing to work on that. Who else? Marianne, I heard you say something. So if, can we, and this is where I would need Paul or Tim to tell, can we then get another member so that the three of us can work on it, so that we can do this for the board, but we don't end up violating any open meeting act?
I think we could do 3 at the most.
Yeah, okay, that's my thought.
I
So,
thought 3 was,
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, okay? So if
Who did we want?
Marianne and I start that, is there someone else who wants to join us?
Well, what you have to say, Paul?
Well, so 3 is a majority of a quorum. So that would be that would be a meeting, I should say.
Sure.
But I think that, you know, if your third person was Wendy or Jay, since they
Yeah,
don't
correct.
vote on anything.
That's
that
correct.
might be a way to do that.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I have a question, Paul. If subcommittees are working, like a bylaw committee
Right.
or a clinical committee are working on potential services, and then we're going to report back to the board, is that allowed for, or is that a public meeting when you meet? If there were 3 of us on a subcommittee and we were all board members, is that considered an open meeting then?
Usually committees are considered, committees of a public body are also public bodies.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Okay.
But what if, let's say there was a subgroup working on data collection about sort of an environmental scan. You could speak individually to each other without violating the Open Meetings Act, even though there are 3 or 4 people gathering information, correct?
Right, if you're speaking individually to each other. But that was the idea.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
It's hard for a committee to
Yeah.
do work
For sure.
without speaking to each other. I would
Yeah.
suggest that
How can you rub your head and
That
pat your
is-
tummy at the same time?
I would suggest
Um,
Paul said that you have 2 board members until we get committee structure in place.
Right,
And we have
right.
open meetings. I think we
Right.
have the 2 people for the scan of services that working on that, and
Right.
maybe Jay or you, Wendy, can be involved, because you got a lot of the information, it sounds like.
Yep,
well,
can
so
look
how about Jay and I will take direction from Dick and Mary Ann on gathering this information.
okay.
I don't know if Jay is still here. Jay, are you there?
Yeah.
He's
Oh,
here.
good.
Okay, all right, so let's do that. So,
Just a point of clarity on the first thing you mentioned about the blurb. I think Wendy has suggested, and I agree that we should put something, since the resume is going out, we're going to tell why we want to be on the board. We should make sure we add our strengths or certain things that we're proficient at that might not be clear on the resume or readily discernible.
I think that was to go to Dick's comment about the personal comment about your presence on the board. He also wanted to add that to there.
yeah,
And maybe we could have like can we get this done within 10 days or something? So that the rest of the board has a reasonable period of time to look at the materials and process them before the board meeting.
okay.
Okay.
And according to, well, do we determine how frequently we have to meet? Or, you know,
Once a year.
No. But according,
That's the minimum.
yeah, that is, I mean.
Yeah, that's what I'm
there is
saying.
some- Are you being facetious or is that true?
Well, under the law, I think we only have to meet once a year. That would be
right.
ridiculous.
Thought
Yeah.
it was a minimum of 4 times a year.
Oh,
4 times?
times a year. Okay.
Okay.
Um, so today's the 3rd. Do you think by the 15th, we could all sort of submit whatever we're going to submit?
Are we going to meet for next quarter to get things off the ground?
Oh,
Are we-
yeah,
well-
we could meet in 2 weeks
Now
again.
we're meeting a little bit longer, a little bit more often until we get a structure in place.
Right.
I agree with that. We got to meet
Okay.
once a month or something.
At least.
Well, then why don't we move it back to the 10th and we could meet the 17th or the 24th
Of April?
of April? I mean, we're all still locked in the house. We're not going anywhere.
I had a quick question too. Moving forward, Fridays are going to be Thursdays and Fridays. I teach in Chicago.
Oh, okay.
Start back teaching until the middle of May. So depending on how often we meet, it might not be an issue if we're meeting, once a quarter or every 2 months, something like that. If we're meeting once a month, Thursdays
Maybe
and
more.
Fridays will be a problem for me initially.
Well, what does Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday work?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is fine. It's just I'm out of town on Thursdays and Fridays.
Okay. Anyone
Monday.
else?
Monday's a tough one for me. I could make it work, but it would be a tough one.
So Tuesday or Wednesday?
Those can work.
Okay.
Fine for me.
Yeah.
Are we looking at this time of the day? Looking at,
Well, this time of the day was chosen because we didn't want to be out at night.
okay.
And then we were meeting downtown, so parking was the issue. So we could pick a different time if everyone chooses to, especially since we
Time
feel
works
like
for me. Yeah. I
I'm
don't know.
retired, so I'm all flexible.
This time
I'm
of the
good. Give me a day and time. I'll make it work.
Me too.
How does April 22nd, which is a Wednesday, 2 p.m.?
It works for me.
Good.
I will have exactly just 1 hour, then I have something at 3.
Well, how about the 21st? That's a
2 p.m.
Tuesday.
At 2?
2?
Did you say 2 o'clock?
Hey. April 21st is good for me.
Yeah.
Like I said,
Okay.
anytime after 12 o'clock, I'm good.
Okay. 2 PM, the 21st. People are gonna get their blurbs done by the 10th. And Paul and I will stand on our heads and get something done. Maybe by the 10th, we'll get something together.
And we'll get a Zoom invite for that, I would assume.
Yeah,
Correct.
Great.
And you'll get the materials to us by, well, we have to post by the 2 days before. So is that when how
Yeah,
are we
by
gonna get materials?
We'll do
Well, I'm
that.
gonna send that executive summary of the children's mental health gaps, probably today. So,
Right, and I'll send you the links on the alignment stuff,
Okay.
the Erickson Institute.
And what about the blurbs? Will those come before the board? I think somebody said we wanted
by
to.
I think we'd agreed to have them by the 10th.
By next Friday. Correct?
Next Friday.
Yes.
That's correct.
To Tim?
Did you need me to do something? I thought you were gonna have a committee and you needed me to do something.
No, I'm okay. I'm good with what I've heard. We're good. We're good.
Okay.
Mary Ann and I will work on the list for the environmental scan. And so we'll make sure that you have that, Julie, in plenty of time.
Okay.
Much appreciated.
And if anybody has any other information about available services, I'm thinking maybe Linda Sandquist might. We'll see if we can't get that out to everybody too, so that we're all more or less on the same page.
I have one request. I know now that, this whole idea of responding to a huge thread of text would constitute an opens meeting. So, because I think last Sunday there were, it just went on and on and on. And I had no idea who I was responding to, and I stopped responding. What would be helpful is if we could have a list of the board phone number, if you don't mind giving your cell number, so that if you do text someone, it'll be in your directory and you'll know who is texting you. So
Yep.
To me, I really prefer that. And then also just your email, so we can just add the contact to our contacts. So.
Well, let's go back to, I'm unsure if Gus was just gonna go ahead and do
Yeah.
an email
I
for
don't- I
each of
didn't
us.
know.
I have
how
to
that
put
was
that
going.
in. I
So
have to
if
send
Tim-
that order in to Gus.
Okay, here's from Gus. He said, food for thought, wait a second. Back, Gus, I lost it.
WCHSM Solutions domain is available. So is WCMNB.org or mentalhealth.wincoil.us. All of those are available.
Just some ideas.
I like the WCMH solutions. That's a lot to type though.
I think that, I don't really care, honestly. Whatever sounds good, or
You could make that decision at your next meeting.
Whatever's
So
the easiest.
Gus, it would be our name .mentalhealth.wincoil.us.
What is your
Or-
name?
So our name at whatever. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. If you chose to do the mentalhealth.wincoil.us, it would be W. Larson at or Wendy at, whichever
Right.
Okay.
Okay. All
does
right.
does it matter to anybody?
Doesn't matter to me. Your one looks good to me.
Want to assign it to us?
Mental health
That way we
sounds
can
good
get
to
it
me.
done sooner.
Just assign it, that would be great.
Yeah.
So mentalhealth.wincoil.us.
Let's go with that one.
I
That
kind
sounds
of
good.
like that.
Perfect.
I'll make it happen.
words and remember the.
Thank you.
Well,
So
I make
maybe
a
by-
motion that we adjourn.
Can you hold on a second? I just wanted to add one thing, if I could, please.
Go ahead.
Thanks. We're talking about the election of officers. The statute requires there be a president and a secretary, and then whatever officers you deem appropriate or necessary. Just so you know, when you're talking about election of officers, that there's 2 mandatory officers and then whoever else you deem necessary. So just to think about that.
Okay.
But technically, we don't have to do anything because we have a president and a secretary right now.
We just interim. We don't have the permanent right now.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
move that we
you.
adjourn. I move that we adjourn.
Okay, we will see you
It's
in,
been
on the
moved that we
21st.
adjourn. It's been second. Do we got a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, at the same right. All right, we're adjourned.
Thank you all.
Great weekend, everybody.
All right, you
Nice
too.
Yeah.
Bye. Don't do